are all here otherwise. There's one other person with their hand raised. Oh, Jamie. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. Yeah, so we'll call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And Mr. Harris will start with the roll call of committee members.
Yes, Ms. Bakay. Mr. Roya?
Here.
Ms. Bakay?
Here.
Ms. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Diaz? Mr. Garcia Molina?
Here.
Mr. Soto?
Here.
And President Smith-Waddell?
Here.
Thank you. So before we get into our agenda items, I actually want to turn it over to Patrick because he's going to be introducing us to a new city staff member.
So thank you. I thought that I was, and now I am not seeing Vaughn on the attendee list right now. I know she headed home and was gonna handle some childcare issues, so it's possible she'll be joining us after. So I may do this this intro after after the audit presentation.
Okay.
Just quickie background. I think I had emailed you all after, or either before Vaughn started or shortly thereafter. But Vaughn Wynn joined us from a Lancaster County nonprofit organization. She started in August, which was like audit is getting finished up and we're prepping for a 2021 budget process. So she's been, as I think everybody here has been, drinking from a fire hose for a little while. So when she joins us, I'll try to notice her on the attendee list and let you all put a face to a name. And I guess with that, we'll jump into the audit piece.
Yeah, so the agenda items, an earlier version of the agenda had these two switched. So we're going to start with the review, the 2019 audit presentation. So we'll need to have added into the meeting Jen Kruger-Kebe, who is from Mayor Dussel, who's going to be doing this presentation. Great. Welcome, Jennifer. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Ooh, a branded background. I haven't seen that yet. That's good.
I cannot take credit for it. It's our marketing person.
Amber, if we could get on that for the city. JK. All right. Okay. All right. So Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can go ahead and share your screen. I know that this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy presentation. I'm excited to dive in.
All right, great. Can everybody see the audit presentation shared on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So you saw that Patrick sent the audited financial statements, and if you open up that PDF, you see there's many pages. Don't worry, I'm not going to go over everything in excruciating detail. The way I'm going to present this is a very high-level review of there's some required communications that I have to have as your auditor. That's the first couple slides, and then I'll dive into some financial highlights. Our responsibility, as described by professional standards, is to express opinions about whether the city's financial statements prepared by management with the committee and board's oversight are fairly presented in all material respects in conformity with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. Our audit does not relieve management of the responsibilities that they have over the financial statements. In planning and performing our audit, we do consider the city's internal control over financial reporting in order to determine the extent of auditing procedures. However, the purpose of our audit is not to opine on the effectiveness of internal control. We also perform the financial statement audit in accordance with the government auditing standards, as well as uniform guidance. Because the city, as every year, expends more than $750,000 of federal expenditures, you have to undergo what's called a government auditing standards audit, as well as uniform guidance. And what that means is we have to evaluate your compliance and regulations and grant contracts. And if we see anything that would arise to a significant deficiency or material weakness, we would have to report that to management. And likewise, for the uniform guidance, we selected the CDBG home for additional compliance work. There's what's called an OMB compliance supplement. The federal government tells us what to audit over that single audit, that major program. And I'll get later into the presentation the opinions we expressed over that. So as part of those procedures, we do not opine on the effectiveness of internal control. However, I mentioned that we do report some findings if we need to in the report. And included in the financial statements, there is a separate city police pension fund financial statement, as well as the fire pension fund. But those trust funds are included in that large packet you did receive today. And also included in the city's main financial statements, they're what's called component units. So these are legally separate organizations that, in accordance with the Accounting Standards Board, are at a level where the city controls sufficient amount of, has some kind of management oversight or identifying critical criteria that would require the reporting to be included in the report. So there are 7 other organizations that are listed on here. And out of those 7, we do not audit 6 of them. So what we do is we receive the audit opinions, the audit statements for those entities, and we pull that information in. So we do not express an audit, a financial statement opinion over those entities. And I spoke of the government auditing standards, which the city's required to undergo that audit. There are several component units that are not required to have that audit. And that's because they don't have grant agreements or other regulations that require them to do that. So in our opinion, we state those specific entities that are not in accordance with the government auditing standards. During the 2019 audit, the Government Accounting Standards Board, which that is what the city's required to, those are the standards you're required to report on and represent your financial statements. There were 2 new GASBs, as GASB is what we call them, that impacted the city's financial statement. The first one was GASB 84, and what this does is it redefines the definition of fiduciary activity. In 2018, there were several agency funds where the city holds those assets and it's reported as a liability. But in accordance with the new definition, there were a couple funds that were no longer under the agency fund criteria, so they were pulled into the general fund. So we included that as a significant accounting policy change during the year. And there was also implementation of GASB 89, where this GASB simplified accounting for interest costs incurred before construction period ends. This was an easy one for the city to adopt because you didn't have to worry about calculating those interest costs for business type activities, including the capital assets. And other than the adoption of these 2 new accounting standards, there were no other new accounting policies adopted during the year, and the application of existing policies did not change from the prior year. We know no transactions entered into the city during the year where there was a lack of authoritative guidance, and all significant transactions have been recognized in the financial statements in the proper period. Accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements and are based upon management's knowledge and experience about past and current events, and also assumptions about the future. There are certain accounting estimates that are particularly sensitive because their significance, it does impact the financial statements. And the most sensitive estimates are listed on this slide: the validity and collectability of receivables, workers' compensation estimates for future liabilities, the depreciable lives of capital assets, actuarial assumptions for the pensions and other post-employment benefit plans, because those assumptions really drive your net pension liability and your OPEB liabilities and the related deferred inflows and outflows of resources, as well as incurred but not reported healthcare claim liabilities. This is what's reported in your internal service fund, and fair value investments. These are all the same sensitive estimates that were reported in the 2018 financial statements. There were no changes during the year. We do evaluate the key factors and assumptions used to develop these estimates and determining that they are reasonable in relation to the financial statements. There are certain disclosures that are sensitive because of the significance to the financial statement users. And the most significant disclosure affecting the financial statements was regarding the negative fund balance in certain governmental funds and negative net position of certain proprietary funds. And that's shown in note 21, very similar to the 2018 financial statements. The financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear, and we encountered no difficulties in work with management performing and completing our audit. I would like to point out that 2020 was very unique for everybody, all organizations, in particular for us as your auditors, because this was the first year we had to perform the full audit remotely. Field work started in the peak of the governor's stay-at-home orders. So our first week of field work, usually we're on site for 2 full weeks, and started in mid-April, and we were able to perform the full audit remotely. So I just wanted to thank management and their staff for being very cooperative with us and providing all the information that we needed electronically. We use a secure share file website. We also met virtually for documentation that we could review, and they also provided remote access to us directly to their accounting system. So we just wanted to thank management for their cooperation during the process.
We missed you so much during those 2 weeks, Jen.
I'm sure you had plenty of other things to work through. And professional standards do require us to accumulate any known and likely misstatements during the audit, other than those are clearly trivial. There was an uncorrected misstatement, but it was immaterial to the financial statements as a whole, and that is included in one of the communication letters. And during our audit procedures, we did come across and had to propose 2 material misstatements. One was over sewer fund capital assets. There were more capital assets than should have been capitalized. So we proposed to management and they corrected the reverse of that, as well as an unavailable tax revenue, and the general fund was overstated. There's not a significant amount of subsequent receipts coming in after the taxes are due in the subsequent year, but 2020 was unique. Go figure, it's COVID year. So we had to propose that material adjustment, but those were accepted and corrected by management. And we're pleased to report that there were no disagreements as a course of our audit. We did receive a representation letter from management similar to the representations in the prior year in order to release the financial statements. In some cases, management may decide to consult with other accountants about auditing and accounting standards, maybe similar to obtaining a second opinion. However, we are not aware of any such relationships or consultations with other accountants. We generally discuss a variety of matters, including application of accounting principles and auditing standards with management every year prior to retention. However, those discussions occurred in a normal course of a relationship, and they were not contingent upon us being your auditors for the 2019 audit. So results of the audit. The audit of the financial statements, the opinion we gave on the city's financial statements is an unmodified opinion. It is the best opinion the city can receive. And in our opinion, we state that the audit reports, in the audit reports of other auditors, that the financial statements presented fairly in all material respects, the financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component units, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So as I mentioned, this is the best opinion you can receive. And as I previously mentioned, out of the 7 component units that are included in the city's financial statements, 6 of them we do not audit. So we audited on those other auditors' reports. And included in the financial statements, those what's called required supplementary information, that's RSI, similar to the prior year. The GASB does require management's discussion analysis, historical pension and other OPEB and other post-employment benefit information, and the budgetary comparison information. Our procedures over those schedules are limited and we do not opine on them, similar to the prior year. There's also supplementary information. There's some schedules for your sewer system. 2 of them we did give an in relation to opinion where we stated that their information was materially correct in relation to the financial statements. And there was one where we did not express an opinion on. That's the schedule of net costs of operations and the cost of treating those per gallons. So similar to the prior year. And also the government auditing standards. I mentioned that there are a couple of component units that are not included under those standards, but we do give a separate letter in relation to those auditing standards. So with all of that said and done, now we can dive into some numbers at a very high level. So the first portion I'm going to go over is the governmental activities. So the financial statements of a governmental entity are pretty unique. And if you've been through this presentation before, you and have looked at the city's financial statements, they're very similar to other cities' financial statements. But governmental activities, it focuses on the economic. So this is almost thinking of a business, operating at a business, which we all know governments truly don't, but the GASB requires this. So the governmental activities are on the accrual basis of accounting. So this is the statement where you will see debt recorded as a liability, your capital assets or assets, and other liabilities such as your net pension liabilities. Some financial highlights from prior year to current year. You can see I included some historical information in here as well. In 2019, your change in net position, which that is essentially your net income, was $1.8 million. What contributed to this was during the year, the Lancaster Parking Authority had a transaction, which I'll go into in a little bit, that increased that essentially there was a loan receivable due to the Lancaster Parking Authority and the city that increased it by $3 million. So that increased your assets during the year. And there's a separate note disclosure, note 8, if you want to look at the details of that. And what that was Parking Authority purchased the North Queet String Garage from the Redevelopment Authority. And that purchase was done a $3 million unsecured note. And then the Redevelopment Authority assigned that note to the city. How that was recorded in the city's financial statements is the note receivable came on, and then that $3 million essentially shown as a revenue in your governmental activities. And your revenue increased by $5.3 million, mainly as a result of the $3 million increase due to that intra-entity transfer is what we call it. And property taxes increased by $2.6 million. 2019 was the year that the millage rate increased and went from 10.7 to 11.7. So about a 9.3% increase during the year. And the expenses increased by $1.3 million. Majority of that on the governmental activities was the disposal or the sale of the Public Works Operations Center that resulted in a loss during the year. This chart is a historical graphical analysis of your governmental activities comparing revenue to expenses. If you have the financial statements in front of you, PDF page 25 and 26 shows the statement of activities. So if you wanted to see by department the expenses versus program, the representation will show you what is driving these changes by department. And it's also helpful for the users to see the true cost of each department versus program expenses. Of course, what helps make up that deficit by department are your property taxes, as it is for every city. And this chart shows the 3 different categories of your net position for your governmental activities. This is your equity for all your governmental funds in accordance with the accrual basis of accounting. So the GASB requires the 3 components: unrestricted, restricted, and net investment in capital assets. As of the end of the year, I mentioned your net income increased by $1.8 million. So your governmental activities net position is negative. It's a negative $137 million in total. What drives that is the net pension liability and your OPEB liability, just as it is for every city in the state of Pennsylvania. And those liabilities are driven by your contractual obligations for future pension and healthcare costs. But out of your net pension, your net position, 28% is net investment in capital assets and 3% is unrestricted.
And I'm sorry, Jen, I just wanted to jump in there on that last one. So can you just note that the increase, or the decrease from 2017 to 2018 and then sort of steady, that difference is primarily the OPEB, the post-retirement medical liability that came on due to GASB requirements for 2018, right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for pointing that. 2018 was the adoption when you had to record that full OPEB liability. So that's why you see that large jump.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Which, like I said, you would see that in every city financial statements. And now for the business type activities, these are your sewer, water, trash, and stormwater funds. And the total net position, which is your equity, there was a net loss during the year of $1.8 million. Your revenue decreased by about $3 million. Their charges for services decreased by $2.7 million during the year. 2018 was when you had some settlement and delinquent municipality payments were received in 2018. So that's why we're seeing that decrease in 2019. And there were more operating and capital grants and contributions in 2018 compared to 2019. And that's just based upon the types of capital projects that are going on and the timing of the receipts. The expenses increased by about $1.5 million, and a majority of that increase was due to interest payments in the water fund, and that's in accordance with the regularly scheduled interest payments. And here's another graphical analysis for your business type activities revenue versus the expense. And if you want to see a further breakout by fund, once again, I'll refer to the PDF pages 25 and 26, where you can see the sewer and water. And similar to the governmental type activities, your net position, which is your equity, needs to be broken up between unrestricted, restricted, and net investment in capital assets. And you can see the largest portion of your net position is your net investment in capital assets. And now the focus on for some financial highlights on your general fund. So your general fund is your chief operating fund, and this is included in the governmental fund financial statements. If you have your financial statements in front of you, if you turn to PDF pages 27 and 29, you'll see the governmental funds, and the general fund is the first column on the left. And this is on the current resources. So how these are reported is similar to how you budget. So think near term. Any capital additions are expensed, any payments on your debt are expensed. You don't worry about recording those assets or those liabilities. Your net income in the general fund was $1.5 million, so it was a very good year for the general fund. Your revenue increased by 4.2. I mentioned the millage tax increase, that was $2.1 million increase during the year. And due to the sale of the Public Works Operations Center, that revenue, the proceeds were received to record in the fund of 1.4. So that was driving your income during the year. Expenses did increase by about $3.3 million. A majority of that is due to pension contributions increased during the year in accordance with Act 205, your MMO payments, medical insurance for retirees increase, and increase in payroll and related costs.
I have a question real quick. I apologize. You're referring to page 25 through 29 as being numbered. In the PDF that I received, those pages are not matching up.
I'm sorry, for the general fund.
So page 25 on my end gives me like the definition for like the Lancaster Higher Education Authority.
Oh, I was referring to PDF page instead of the actual page number.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. And since I apologize. So I also wanted to go into some budget highlights. This is not included in the slide, so I'm going to just pull up these financial statements. So I just already had them. Now on PDF page 171 shows for the general fund, your budget to actual during the year. So I just wanted to show some highlights during the year. So 2019 for the general fund budgeted about $61 million in appropriations, and that is seen on this page, PDF page 172. So this is all year-over-year expenses. So you budgeted $60.9 million. However, your actual came in lower due to virtually all operating departments by administrative function were able to delay hiring for vacancies. You had lower costs than you anticipated. And likewise, the previous page, this is your budget versus actual for your revenue. And the revenue was budgeted at $58.5 million. And the actual was higher than what was anticipated due to higher real estate taxes during the year than anticipated. There was an increase in enforcement of parking regulations during the year, and the sale of that public works came in higher than you anticipated. So in the end, you budgeted a shortfall of about 2.4. However, you had that net income of 1.5. So actual was higher than what you anticipated during the year. And here's another graph for the general fund balance. So the different categories are for unassigned, assigned, non-spendable during 2019. And out of the total general fund balance, 82% of it is assigned, and it's assigned for the future year's budget, fire station construction project, debt service, and excess workers' compensation expenditures. And the remaining 18% is unassigned and available for spending, and that dollar amount was $2.7 million during the year. And your total general fund balance is $15.9 million. That's essentially your equity. And here's another historical comparison for your general fund only, revenue versus expenses. You can see growing a little bit, but your revenues are higher than your expenditures because you had that surplus during the year. And this is another chart. It's a little busy, but there are different, if you're looking at that governmental fund revenue and expense statement, you can see there are different categories of expenses that are represented. Now, this governmental funds, this is not just your general fund. So this is all your governmental funds. So this is including all your special revenue funds, which is all your grant funds, capital projects, and debt service. And you can see a majority of the revenue is taxes, and your second is grants and contributions. Ever since we've been your auditors, we've always seen the city does a great job at getting grant funding in order to subsidize the capital costs and capital outlays. So you can see that's your second highest revenue source is grants and contributions. And here's another chart on the expenditure side for governmental funds. Of course, the largest expense for your governmental funds is your public safety. In 2019, that was 45%. And the second was debt service. You can see debt service was a little higher. That's this, I guess you would say that's this darker color here all the way to the right, debt services is higher. But 2019, you had a current refunding of the 2009 bonds. So that full principal payment is shown as an expense because the proceeds are shown as a revenue. So that was the reason for that change. So that was all the financial highlights. And then I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the city has to undergo a single audit in accordance with the uniform guidance. So these are the summary of results regarding that audit. For the government auditing standards, there was a finding that we had to report. I did mention we had some material proposed entries for capital assets as well as the property tax revenue. So because those were material, they were corrected by management, but we did report that in the schedule of findings and question costs during the year. But for the federal program itself, we did give an unmodified opinion under uniform guidance, and that's the best opinion the city can receive. And the federal program that we audited was the CDBG Entitlement Grants Cluster. So we did not have any compliance or internal control issues that we had to report in the opinion regarding the testing of that. And in 2018, there was a finding, and that was corrected and shown in the 2019 financial statements as well. And as part of our audit, I mentioned we do gain an understanding of internal control in order to perform our auditing procedures, but we don't opine on it. However, if we come across during or gaining our understanding of internal controls, areas where we could recommend best practice considerations, we do include that in the form of a management letter. And we did have one, it's a repeat from previous years regarding reimbursements. We do suggest that the city establish a general fund expenditure offset account that corresponds to the reimbursed expenditure. It's been their policy to do the opposite, but we're recommended to segregate those reimbursements. And the remaining are you can see the new accounting standards. These will be applicable in future city financial statements. The Government Accounting Standards Board has been very busy. You would think a pandemic would slow them down, but no. They are keeping up with international standards and also the Accounting Standards Board that nonprofits and for-profit entities have to follow. So there were, I think, 3 or 4 standards issued during the pandemic alone, but the positive is one of them was delaying other accounting standards. So the one that I think that's going to affect the city probably the most is GASB 87 regarding leases. And this one won't be applicable to the city until 2022 now because the GASB did delay that. So that's the good news. And we could work with management on the impact of that. But what that means is that management will have to itemize all the leases that are contractually as a lessee and a lessor and report the asset and liability associated with that on the books. But like I said, we'll work with management on that because it does take time to evaluate all those leases and get that information. And the other remaining GASBs, probably minimal impact. Some of them may only impact your component units and not the city themselves. But in the management letter, it looks like a lengthy document, but majority of it is explanations of these GASB statements. And that is all that I had to present. I could go into more detail over any of the financial statement components that I covered, or if anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you, Jen. Well, I'll kick us off. I just have sort of a general question. So we received an unmodified opinion, which doesn't sound very impressive, but you said is the best. That's my favorite thing about auditing. What percentage, or if you could kind of give an idea of what percentage of municipal governments overall, or maybe in Pennsylvania, receive an unmodified opinion versus that don't?
I would say a high percentage do, unless they're on a different basis of accounting than what's required in accordance with GAAP. So if somebody's cash basis, they can't have, we used to call it a clean opinion or unmodified opinion because it has to be in accordance with those standards. But I would say on percentage, unless, so the reason you would get to a qualified opinion is if there are material transactions that aren't recorded properly and not corrected by management, or if there were component units that weren't included in the report. So I think that's probably where we would see it the most on municipality audits.
Great. And you mentioned that one of the pieces you looked at this year was the CDBG dollars, or that fund. Can you talk about exactly what you looked at as part of that audit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do use what's called a compliance supplement, and that's put out by the federal government. So they tell us the requirements that they want us to test. Specifically, what we look at is for allowability of the projects and eligibility. So we get a population of all the money that went out, and we choose a sample and we test the internal controls. So the controls over how does the city decide that the projects were allowable and the people that received those proceeds were eligible to receive them. And then we also test the compliance aspects of it that the federal government tells us to. So I would say we probably tested 15 to 20% of your total project files. And if we saw an issue where your internal control was lacking, what you told us our key control was, that we wouldn't be able to give an unmodified opinion over that CDBG program. So we didn't come across any internal control or any compliance issues when we performed those testing. And we also look at how the city draws down the money from HUD. So we get a listing of all the drawdowns, what's called cash management. And this grant is a reimbursement grant. So you have to incur the expenses. You have to have the invoices before you request that money. So we test for that, and we look at your process of the timing of when you've received those funds and made sure you didn't hold on to the money instead of paying the expenses. And we didn't see any issues regarding that testing either.
Great. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. I'll open up to questions from the committee or the council as a whole. We can have a discussion or any other questions. I can't see everybody, so I apologize. Jen, I'm going to have you unshare your screen just so I can see everybody. Everybody's waving at me because I can't. Because of Zoom. Okay. Anyone? Okay.
I don't have any questions, Councilor Bakay, but if I could just say, this is a I don't know how many years run from our accounting department under Patrick's leadership that we have had a clean audit statement. And I just want to acknowledge the hours upon hours of work that goes into preparing audits every single year. And this is over and above, although Mayor Dussel doesn't do all of the audits for the associated business units, there are audits that are also conducted for other business units to which our administrative staff contribute. And so I just want to acknowledge and thank Patrick and his team for a job well done again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. All right.
Actually, Councilor Bakay, in reviewing, I just have one question, if I may. I really appreciate, just like Mayor said, Patrick, I can't imagine what this was like virtually.
Well, I'll jump in and say, on me virtually, not so much. On the
All right.
accounting staff, an absolute mountain of work.
Yeah.
And the ability for, we went to our cloud version of our accounting system on a scheduled changeover on March 14th. That was scheduled pre everything going, you know, all of the things. So the timing was very good on that, and the ability to give Mayor Dussel remote access into the accounting system so they could do all of the things definitely helped out. But there was still an awful lot of hard copy paper scanning and everything that accounting staff were doing. So,
well, I am extremely grateful because that is something that automatically I was like, this is a nightmare, and I would not have been wanting to be the one to do it. So I'm grateful for everyone that took a part in that. I am just going over the OPB plan provisions, and I saw a note here about how the union labor contracts for the police, firefighters, and other non-uniform union employees establish that. And I wanted to know, kind of from your expertise, if you found those provisions within the contract to be similar in our city as it is in other communities.
Yes, I would say that they are, because there's only so much that that the city can negotiate with a union. So we don't see anything that looks uncomparable to other cities that we audit.
Great, thank you. And go ahead, Patrick.
I was just going to add on to that, I think probably compared to other cities are, you know, our other sort of, you know, Harrisburg, Reading, York, Bethlehem, Easton, those cities. One of the things that was different was we had in both the police and fire contracts, full no cost post-retirement medical benefits for both employees and spouse after age 65. So even after Medicare eligibility. In an arbitration award, well, two separate arbitration awards in 2011 and 2012, we were able to modify those benefit structures for new hires, so that their post-retirement medical benefit is basically covering the employee only and not the spouse, but also ends at Medicare eligibility. And the post-retirement medical liability savings there was significant, as you can imagine, with our employee numbers.
I appreciate that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Another unique for the city is you do partially fund your OPEB. There are a lot of municipalities out there that are truly pay as you go, which means the municipality doesn't have a separate trust putting contributions for future liabilities. So you can see that factored into your calculation as well.
Great, thank you. And then the last thing that just is popping up as I'm going through this is obviously looking at the expenditures versus the revenue of the police department. Do you find that that's also like that discrepancy is that much in other communities? Okay.
Absolutely. So essentially, if you're looking at the statement of activities, your taxes are subsidizing your public safety costs.
Okay. I appreciate that. Councilor Bakay, that's the only question that I have.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think we got everyone. Thank you so much, Jen. We appreciate you being here. And we have your contact information should we have any other questions.
Yes, absolutely.
I looked, Patrick, and I did see Vaughn in the attendees list.
Yes.
So we can bring her in so we can meet her. Okay, welcome, Vaughn.
Vaughn, you're muted. Whoop, there we go.
No.
There we go.
I see everyone, but I can't see myself. Let in. Very good. Thank you.
We appreciate.
So before you jumped in, earlier, Vaughn, I gave a quick introduction of you, but you started at the magical time period at the very end of an audit and right before budget preparation is going on. Like I said, I'm thrilled so far as Vaughn has been digging into a ton of work. There's a significant learning curve, obviously, coming from outside of municipal government. And there really isn't a good time to start a job like this because there's either going to be an audit going on or there's going to be a budget being developed, or both are going to be happening at the same time. So I want to thank Vaughn for the work she's done, just really jumping in, and I will let her say a few words.
I'm good. I'm just
Yep.
still getting used to Zoom, but thank you, Patrick. I just want to say it's been a privilege to start my career with the city in this position. As Patrick said, I have to agree. In the accounting world, you're either doing some sort of audits or closing the financials, and there's really no good time. But for me, I think it's working out pretty well. The transition's working out pretty well. Obviously, there's a good bit of learning on my part. But to start at the end of an audit and to dig in, it's been very helpful. I'm finding my ways with everything, and jumping into the budget, the new year, just touching everything. It's actually coming together, and everyone's been very helpful. So I'm pretty excited. It's an exciting time for all of us. I have to say exciting because I don't I don't know how else to describe COVID. But I'm very excited. This is a good change for me, and I look forward to working with every single one of everyone on in this meeting. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Vaughn.
All right. So we'll move right on to our second item on the agenda. It's Administration Bill number 11, 2020. And I believe we have some folks from the LPA, Jay Wanger, Amber, and Susan Bleacher, I think. And I think that might be everyone that we definitely need right now, but if anyone else, interested parties need to be added in, just go ahead and raise your hand so that we know. Larry's raising his hand. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and I believe Jay is going to start.
Yeah, Jay is going to start. Jay, just let me know when you want me to share screen with the presentation that you sent.
Go ahead, Patrick. You can put it up. That'll be
Okay.
a lot easier, I think, for the group.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are.
Okay, so thank you. Good evening, everybody. I see a couple of new faces from the last time we were in front of council for the Parking Authority. So by way of quick introduction, I'm Jay Wanger with Susquehanna Group Advisors. We are the financial advisor for the Parking Authority. I see Susan is on the call. I think Larry might be on the call as well. And the purpose for us making a presentation for you this evening is to introduce really two projects. One is to potentially refinance the Parking Authority's outstanding 2016 bank loan that's currently held by S&T Bank. Based on the recent drop in interest rates, we can actually refinance a very low interest rate and realize debt service savings. And so that is one of the components of the project. And then the second is to complete the financing for the project, which includes the parking garage in the library on North Queen Street. And as the project costs were more fully developed over the last several months, the authority needs an additional $5 million to complete that project. And so again, the second part of this would be to have the city council approve and provide a guarantee for an additional $5 million to complete that project. The $5 million of additional debt will fall under and within the projected CRIZ revenue numbers. So it's still expected to be fully funded by the CRIZ revenue for that block. But it would be an additional financing in addition to the bonds that were issued in 2019. Again, to back up to the refinancing, based on interest rates as recently as a couple of days ago, we're looking at very significant savings on a present value basis, a little over $1 million. That represents about 9% of the bonds we're refinancing. And just to give you some kind of baseline to measure, typically in our industry, if the savings are 3% or greater, we consider that a go decision. So to be at 3 times the minimum threshold, we think is a very good level for the authority. And most of those savings would occur from years 2025 through the end of the loan, which is 2035. And so that really would be a reduction of debt service savings, which would lessen the city's exposure on at least that piece of their overall debt. And again, the additional $5 million will be financed over the current, the term of the existing project, which goes out to 2044. And we're just layering in $5 million over that time frame, again, to fall under the projected revenues to be realized from the CRIZ. So as we get through the marketing of those bonds, we will produce another, what we call self-liquidating debt report, which Patrick will use to file with DCED so that like all of the current debt, the additional $5 million would not count against the city's borrowing capacity. It will be legal exposure under your guarantee agreement, but won't count against your ability to borrow for additional projects. And for so long as the authority's revenues, including the CRIZ revenue, are able to meet the debt service obligations, none of that will count against the city's borrowing capacity. That is a quick overview. We're not extending debt on the refinancing. It's just like refinancing a home mortgage, just at a lower interest rate. There are 2 things with the bank loan currently. One, it's at a higher rate than we can currently finance that issue, but it's also not a fixed rate for the term of the bond. So this gives the authority a very good opportunity to fix the interest rate for the entire term of the loan, as well as realize debt service savings. On the new money, again, we're going to try to fit it into the existing CRIZ revenue. We're looking at a true interest cost on the new money of something a little under 2.5%. So when you look at money that goes out to 2044 and you can borrow at 2.5%, it's a very, very attractive borrowing opportunity in the marketplace for the authority. That is a quick overview. There is a second page that does have more detail of numbers. I was trying to keep this more to a conversation level, given the difficulty of following lines and columns on a conference call. But if you have any questions regarding the numbers that Patrick just put up on the screen, I would be happy to answer those. You can see on the left side in what would be green shaded boxes, we have a series of A of 2016, which is an outstanding bond issue, so we're not touching those bonds. And then the preliminary series A of 2020 refunding would be the projected refunding of the S&T bank loan that was done in 2016. And then the total non-CRIZ debt service is shown then as in the darker green box, if you will, at approximately $1.5 million per year through 2034, and then a significant drop off thereafter. The 2019 bonds are shown in the center of the page in the blue shaded columns. And then on the far right, we have projected CRIZ revenue, and then you can see the excess. So this $5 million will get much, much closer to consuming the projected CRIZ revenue. But to Susan's credit, in the 2019 financing, we had tried to build in some cushion along the way, which turned out to be very fortuitous planning, because we're going to have to consume a lot of that cushion with the proposed financing. You could see in a couple of years there's slight negatives. We'll work around those when we get the final interest rates and the final structure. Patrick, is there anything I missed or any comments you'd like to make before we?
No, I don't. The only comment I really wanted to make is this is something that, I mean, Jay addressed, but I think is important that with this refinancing going from a variable rate issuance to a fixed rate, which does, while the city provides a guarantee for all the parking authorities' debt. I like the set it and forget it kind of concept here, that we're going to a fixed rate. So even though the variable rate had a maximum of 3.95%, that's still, in terms of real money, that's a risk that interest rates sometime in the future go up. So nice to be able to get a fixed rate at, I don't know that I ever thought we would be talking about rates below 2%, but here we are.
Yeah, it's a remarkable time for somebody who started in the industry when you could buy 10-year insured bonds at 14%. This is stunning.
Excellent. All right. I'm just going across the top here. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm actually, just out of curiosity, could we say where you're going for the refinancing, or did you and I missed it?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
I'm not sure if we can, at this point, you can say what institution you're refinancing with, or if you did and I missed it, maybe?
No, thank you. You raised, that's a good question. I should have highlighted that. So like the 2019 bonds, which were sold to investors in the public marketplace, those bonds were underwritten by Benning and Scattergood, which is a Pennsylvania underwriting firm. So our plan of finance this time is the same public bond issue to be sold to retail investors, institutional investors, and Benning and Scattergood will again be the underwriter. And the other note I'd like to make is your financial advisor, Concord Advisors, has, like the 2019 bonds, has reviewed all of the numbers and documents. So there is somebody looking over your shoulder as well.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jay. Are there any other questions from the committee or council as a whole, or also Susan or Larry, if there's anything that you wanted to add at this time?
Councilor Bakay.
Yeah.
So I understand everything that we're talking about with Series A. Could you, Patrick or Jay, explain Series B for someone that is not an accountant? And just explain it like a little bit in an easier fashion for me to understand. There was a lot that was thrown out there and I didn't capture all of it.
Yeah, so the Series A and Series B is just a way to separate and delineate the refunding component of this from the new money piece. So from your perspective as a guarantor, they really just get thrown into a lump sum, if you will. But again, for purpose of trying to delineate savings with the refunding transaction, we're just arbitrarily designating that as Series A, and the new money piece to complete the project is just for purpose of separating transactions called Series B. They could be 1 and 2. We could have picked any way to delineate them.
Yeah, so I understand at least the basics of that. I meant more of the content of Series B, and if you're able to kind of explain that to me.
Yeah. Let me jump in. Let me jump in there, Jay.
Thank you.
I'll talk about why we need the new money. So back in 2019, we funded the Christian Street project. It was about a little over $29 million that we sold bonds in our Series A of 2019. I think it was Series A. But in any case, we did a 2019 issuance that we thought would fully fund the Christian Street project. With delays as a result of COVID, and we are subject to municipal bidding. We had bids that came in higher than we anticipated. So when we sold the bonds back in September of 2019, we had an estimate from Benchmark Construction, our construction manager, that said, you're going to spend $30 million on this project. Then in May of 2020, we got all of the trade bids back. Earlier in 2020, approximately February, we received the largest bid, which was for precast concrete which came in higher than anticipated as well. And so the budget for the garage is closer to $35 million now, but we have competitively bid the project. Just the estimates from August of 2019 were underestimating the cost of the project. And so now we're required to have funding to fully fund this project. And we were looking to delay borrowing until 2021, closer to the end of the project, because we don't need the money right now. We still have money from the original issue. However, due to the rate environment and the refinancing, we felt one debt issuance, it's more cost effective, and it's also just the right timing before the election, that we felt that the interest rate environment right now was advantageous to us enough to fund this additional $5 million now, instead of waiting until June or July of next year.
Thank you, Susan. That was perfect. I'm able to grasp it a lot better now. Is it any way that you could explain to me the bond maturity structure in the exact way that you just explained to me how we got at the 5 billion?
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
accustomed to this because our board is not financially oriented. So they,
Okay.
I do this regularly.
You're doing great.
The structure of the bonds is in line with CRIS estimated revenues. So the CRIS authority is not guaranteeing, but they're putting the money up to pay for this project in its entirety, all of the debt service. So the CRIS we have a model that says we're expecting, I think it's somewhere around $2 million a year to come in over, the majority of the years where we have the debt. I think Jay has that schedule there of what our CRIS estimated revenue would be. So we align our borrowing up to the revenue so that we're not borrowing more than what the CRIS can pay. So that's the CRIS expires in 2043, somewhere in there. And so we have to end it there. Obviously, we can't make it longer than they are getting money. And, so that is why we structured it in the way that we did, was to align with what we anticipate the CRIS revenues will be. And we did meet with Randy Patterson, the executive director of the CRIS, and ask him for his input on future estimates beyond next year. And we have no reason to believe that these estimates are significantly going to be reduced beyond the next couple of years, in which those next couple of years we won't really need funds from the CRIS, because we capitalize, and this gets a little technical, but we put money in a savings account to pay our debt over the next 2 years while the project is still being built, and while the CRIS is still, using money for other things in that block, so that we don't need money in 2021 from the CRIS. Some really good planning ahead.
Awesome.
Does that help?
That helps a lot. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me just add two other things. One on the cost issues that the parking authority saw. That is a very similar circumstance to what we saw with our fire station projects. We had, estimates, and there are all sorts of things that have changed over the last year that have resulted in, I think, a lot of construction projects in this area and all over to be higher than they would otherwise have been. The other thing is on the CRIS piece. I talked with Randy again this morning, reviewed with him this presentation, and their CRIS modeling, obviously, the revenue that we get in 2021 from the CRIS, or that the CRIS authority will receive, will in all likelihood be down because of because of 2020. But as Susan said, you know, the schedule that they have for debt service in this makes that a workable reduction for a year or so.
I appreciate that, Patrick. And that's it for me, Councilor Bakay.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm scrolling across photos here just to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay. Then in that case, this is a resolution, not an ordinance, correct?
No, it's an ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me address the schedule that we've talked about for this. You know, Susan had said the November 3rd is a date that, you know, nobody knows what happens after that. So they'd like to get things resolved before that in terms of the issuance itself. The refinancing, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, also basically allows the parking authority not to have a December 1st or so debt service payment in 2020. So there's a savings for the authority there. So that requires a fairly fast track in the process for the city council approval of this. The parking authority board is the one that actually approves the bond issue itself. What city council is being asked to approve is the guarantee of that bond issue. So the schedule that we worked out was to have this meeting for the initial review and discussion of the guarantee ordinance. This would be on the agenda for the first reading at the coming council meeting next week. If there's additional need for any other conversation regarding the issuance or the guarantee, we can have that at the Finance Committee meeting on October 5th. That's not a requirement, but you know, we have another meeting in between. And then second reading and adoption of the guarantee ordinance would be scheduled for the first meeting in October, which is October 13th. And that timeline gives the parking authority plenty of time. There's a filing that has to occur with DCED. You heard Jay talk about that. There's a 20-day turnaround time from DCED to get approval of that. So this schedule allows the parking authority to do all the things they need to do and for us to do the same. To have it timed so they can do the bond sale prior to November 3 and have everything funds in hand to deal with their December debt service payment. Did I get anything wrong on that, Jay or Susan?
Yeah, very, very good summary of the schedule and reasons for the schedule. Thank you.
Terrific. Then after hearing all of that, I will actually make a motion then to move this to council for first reading on next Tuesday's meeting, the 22nd.
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Thank you. I just clicked on myself now.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Wenger, and everyone, Susan,
Thank you.
all involved.
So for the meeting on the 22nd, as that's a first reading, you know, I mean, people can do this from home, obviously, so we're not bringing in people into city council chambers, but I think it probably makes sense for parking authority folks to be available at that meeting. We can have you sort of in the meeting, and if there's a question that comes up, pop you in as a panelist, but otherwise I think that should be that part of the meeting anyway should be fairly straightforward since it's only the first reading.
We'll be there.
Great.
Thank you so much.
A good meeting where I didn't have to say anything. Perfect.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, all right, that concludes my second item, and then that concludes the meeting of the Finance Committee. Do we have to adjourn? I don't know how this works on a special meeting. Mr. Harris? He's walked away.
I do not think we need to adjourn, but I will make note of it.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your time and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
And
Thank you.